we will get started with today's webinar. So again, thank you everyone for joining today's grant solicitation webinar, OJJDP FY 2021 Second Chance Act Addressing the Needs of Incarcerated Parents and Their Minor Children. My name is William Moore with OJJDP's INTACT. And I'll be going through a couple of items before we get started for today's webinar. Please note that for our audience who has joined, this is a webinar to review the grant solicitation by OJJDP for the Second Chance Act Addressing the Needs of Incarcerated Parents and Their Minor Children. Please note that the webinar is not specific to the topic of the Second Chance Act, but instead will address the application for the grant solicitation. So I want to just make that known for the audience who's joined us now, if anyone may be confused of what today's webinar is about. Please note that we are indeed recording today's webinar. The recording for this and other webinars are indeed available on OJJDP's multimedia page. If you'd like to get access to any supporting materials, you can reach out to OJJDP TTA at usdoj.gov and we can get you access to any of the supporting materials related to any of those webinars. If you are having trouble with downloading the materials, and again, I did put up a file for folks to download, but if you're having issues or trouble downloading that PDF of today's presentation, please note that you can contact the help desk and we can get you access to that. Again, I do have the file up. It should be in a file transfer box there where you can easily download it. However, if you're running into issues or having any error messages, you can contact OJJDP TTA at usdoj.gov to get access to that document. For the most optimal audio, we do ask for you all to select the option to have the WebEx system dial your phone. That will provide the most optimal audio for your experience. If you're having any technical difficulties during the webinar, please send a private chat to me, and I'll be more than happy to address any technical issues that you may be experiencing. All right. Oh, let me go to, I didn't go to my, here we go. Okay. Now, please note that during today's grant solicitation webinar, we will be reviewing, again, the grant solicitation. If you have any questions in regards to the grant solicitation, you can easily send those questions during today's presentation. What I want to ask our audience to do is please select all panelists when you're sending your questions. So in that to box in the chat where it asks you to send your questions, please make sure that you are selecting all panelists before you send your question. And then you'll just simply type your question and hit enter or send, and we'll record your question and we'll address them at the very end of today's webinar during our Q&A session. Now, for those who are attending in a group, please help us count. Go to the chat window and type the total number of additional people that are in the room with you today. If you're viewing alone, there's no need to type anything at this time. So, for example, if it's yourself and say your program manager that is viewing today's webinar with you, then you can simply just go to the chat and type in +1 as the additional person that is in the room with you viewing today's grant solicitation webinar. Again, if you're viewing alone or by yourself, there's no need to type anything at this time. All right, so that being said, I'm going to turn today's grant solicitation webinar on over to our presenter and moderator, Ms. Kathy Mitchell, for today's web event. Kathy, I am passing the ball along to you, and whenever you are ready, you can take it away. And Kathy, if you're talking, you're on mute. You want to go down to your mute button in WebEx and just hit the unmute there.
Thank you. Thank you, William.
No worries.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today for the FY 2021 Second Chance Act, addressing the needs of incarcerated parents and their minor children. I'm going to go up just one slide so that we can go over the topics for today. I think that was supposed to come afterwards, but I don't know. So the topics covered today will provide an overview of the program. We'll go over the goals and objectives, the application process, and then share some general tips for developing a successful application. So you can see, for those of you who were able to download the slides that William referred to a moment ago, you'll be able to click on this active link here, and that will allow you to follow along in the solicitation as we go over various components. Remember that the application deadline is the 19th of February. If you were not able to download the slides, then you can just go to Google, or you can go to OJJDP.gov, and you can type in the title of the solicitation, and that will bring you right to the announcement, and you can follow along throughout the presentation. So here's an overview of the opportunity. The maximum dollar amount for the entire project, which means this is the amount that we've appropriated to this solicitation, and once we make the awards, it will amount to $5 million. We anticipate making up to 8 awards, and each award will be up to $750,000. That's for the entire 3-year project period. Sometimes the awards are a little bit less, but this is the absolute maximum dollar amount. There is no match requirement, and it is a 36-month project period beginning in October. So this program supports activities that foster positive family engagement between incarcerated parents and their children within detention and correctional facilities. It also implements programs and services that support the children of incarcerated parents to reduce the likelihood of antisocial behaviors and future involvement in the justice system. The goal of Coip, which stands for Children of Incarcerated Parents, is to assist states and localities in developing or expanding services that meet the needs of the incarcerated population, as well as their minor children. Other goals are to prevent violent crime, reduce recidivism, and provide support for those minor children. So here are a few of the goals and objectives. It will be to provide support to facilities to produce staffing, equipment, tools, and resources to create child-friendly spaces, develop safety protocols, and also develop programming and services that will support the needs of the incarcerated population and their children. Eligibility, and this is listed at the beginning of the program announcement. Eligibility includes cities, township governments, county governments, and also state governments. And here's a bit more language about eligibility. You can find this directly linked in the solicitation. So priority areas. For this announcement, there are Ojp Priority Areas, Office of Justice Programs, and there are OJJDP Priority Areas. And all 3 are of particular note, and we'll go over them individually. So first up, we have the OJJDP Priority Area. This includes ensuring protections for children. We will give priority consideration to applications that have policies, practices, and or procedures in place that protect children and or specific policies and procedures that detail the appropriate steps for terminating visitation and or parent-child engagement when continued facilitation of the parent-child relationship is not in the child's best interest. I would advise you to pay careful attention to the guidelines under this priority consideration. As stated in the solicitation, there are specific items that reviewers will be looking for. They will be looking for real specific policies, real specific guidance regarding how, as an applicant, you will ensure child protections. Oftentimes, applicants, in order to be responsive to this priority area, will include a children's Bill of Rights, or they will include rules and regulations that are posted in the waiting area, and we want applicants to think really intuitively about this priority area. How might you come to partner with a welfare agency? How might you go through the steps? How might you train your staff specifically to ensure that minor children who are on the property or who are involved in the program participants' life are protected? The next priority area is an Ojp priority area, and this will give priority consideration to applicants that address specific challenges in rural communities and demonstrate individuals who are intended to benefit from the programs and services that are taking place or that are benefiting those who reside in high poverty areas or persistent poverty counties. This is another priority consideration that has very specific guidelines, and so I would encourage you to read through the announcement to determine if you choose to respond to this priority area, to determine that your application contains all of the requested information. And I think so just read through the application just to ensure that you are able to respond completely to all of the specific guidelines that are contained for this priority announcement. So qualified opportunity zones, I just wanted to take a moment to dive deeper into this particular consideration because it's one that applicants often miss, even those who choose to respond to it in their applications. And so when you want to respond to QOZs, qualified opportunity zones, and all of this is written in the narrative, ensure that, yes, you have to provide a separate narrative. This is separate from the general application narrative, so this is going to be a separate file with a narrative explaining how your project will clearly address public safety concerns and how it will clearly benefit those who reside in qualified opportunity zones. It must be accompanied by a map of those opportunity zones, and you must include the census tract number. So oftentimes we get these great narratives talking about the benefit to public safety, the maps, the zip codes, all of the necessary information, but they omit the census tract number. So in the solicitation, there will be a link to how you can get the census tract number, and you absolutely want to ensure that the narrative, along with addressing how it will respond to the QOZs, you also want to make sure you list each of the identifiable census tract numbers. That's very important. Of course, this is not mandatory. You can certainly apply for this announcement without responding to any of the QOZs. You certainly can pick and choose which one fits your project. You might choose to respond to none of them. You might respond to one of them. You might respond to all of them. These are just, it gives your application priority, but regardless, your application, as long as it has the other necessary components like the narrative, like the budget, it would still be considered for funding whether or not you're fully responsive to the priority areas. Evidence-based programs or practices. OJP strongly encourages and emphasizes the use of data and evidence in policy making and program development in the criminal justice and juvenile justice and crime victim services. And for additional information, you can look at page 8 of the solicitation, or you can go to this link on your screen and visit the application resource guide for additional information. This just means that when you conduct your needs assessment, when you put together your proposal, when you develop deliverables, outcomes, activities, that you want to lean on those programming and services that are evidence-based. Performance measures survey. The goals and objectives and deliverables are directly related to the performance measures and help demonstrate the results of your work. Applicants are not required to submit performance data with the application, but this is just an alert to let you know what's to come should you be awarded. Applicants that become grantees are responsible to submit performance measurement data, and as an award recipient, more information, details, and specifics will be given to you so that you'll be able to respond appropriately to this requirement. There's a link on your screen. You may visit the Ojp performance measurement page to get more information about the performance measures. Preparing your Coip application. So it's a two-step process. Those of you who have applied for federal funding before are certainly aware of this process, and those who might be new to the process, you'll want to register firstly at grants.gov, and then you'll submit your application via the new Just Grants system. Pay close attention to the customer service numbers and emails on your screen for support. And of course, there is a help desk number and email address for Just Grants if you have any questions at all about the application process. Planning and organizing your writing. So you want to pay careful attention to the application checklist. The checklist will indicate all of the necessary ingredients, all of the requirements, things that are not required but are additional, things that will help make your application full and complete. And it goes into really great detail about how many pages the narrative should be, what font size and style you should use, and it talks about logic models and timelines and things like that. And so certainly you want to take a look at the application checklist and make sure that you have everything that you need for your application prior to submitting it. The budget detail worksheet. So we encourage all applicants to submit their budget using the standardized budget detail worksheet. There's a link on your screen that takes you directly to a copy of the budget detail worksheet. You are not required, per se, to submit your budget in the application using the budget detail worksheet. However, if you are awarded, you at that time will be asked to transfer your budget details onto the budget detail worksheet. And so here's some information about that worksheet on your screen. You can also go to, there's a link in the solicitation to what an application should include, and that page also talks more about some of the ingredients that the budget should include and some of the details that you'll want to have included in your budget. The application process, budget detail worksheet. So you can see the budget preparation and submission information section of the Ojp Grant Application Resource Guide, which is linked at the bottom of your screen. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, this gives you more details about preparing and submitting your budget. And it also gives you some guidance regarding any proposed contracts that you plan to initiate out of the grant, any subawards, and any prearrangement costs. Before you submit your application, you want to complete the application resource guide, the application checklist. Make sure you did not miss or omit anything. Pay critical attention to those elements that are required, and then pay special attention to the priority areas that we went over previously. And lastly, pay attention to the OJJDP policy, priority areas of ensuring protections for children. And you'll see here the page numbers that those priority areas are listed in the solicitation for additional information. File names. And so when you submit your application, just be sure that you choose very clearly identifiable file names. If it's a program narrative, call it a program narrative. If it's a budget, call it a budget. If it's a timeline, call it a timeline. And literally, that's all you have to call it. So a lot of times we receive files. So your application comes to us not in just one big document. It comes to us in several different pieces. And we're scrolling through to read and review the different components. And a lot of times the file names speak to internal language, organizational language, department language. It might have a last name in it, and we can't readily identify that information, especially if it is unique to your organization. So I always recommend just calling the file name what it is, even if it's one word. So you can certainly say narrative, you can say budget detail worksheet, or you can say budget, or you can just say timeline. If you are responding to a priority area, you can say, Ojp Priority Area, and then the name of that priority area. So Ojp Priority Area QOZ. We definitely know what that is. That is immediately identifiable. Or OJJDP Ensuring Protections for Children. That's immediately identifiable. But as much as you can, try to eliminate any additional internal references in the file name. Submitting your application. So pay careful attention to the rules about naming files, as we just went over. Try to submit your application a few days prior to the due date if you can. And then remember that we typically send out notifications by September 30th for successful applications. Those applicants who were not awarded are notified later in the year, typically October or the November timeframe. And so here are some helpful resources for assistance with your application. You can reach out to the Response Center for any questions that you might have, particularly those questions that we were not able to get to today. Next, you can visit the funding page for information on applying. And then we have an FAQ question, and we have an FAQ section for those who have general questions that are already printed with the answers. And these are some of our links to our various social media platforms. I encourage you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. We have a newsletter, News at a Glance, and then we have our Juve Just. These are resources that can keep you abreast of our activities, our funding announcements, any policies or white papers that we're developing are always broadcast quickly over our multiple social media platforms. It's just another way to stay in touch with what we're doing. At this time, I just want to thank you all for joining the webinar. I hope that you found it useful. And I will turn it back over to William.
All right. So, Kathy, it looks like we had a pretty quiet audience so far. I believe you were extremely thorough. So we're still waiting on the questions to come in, and I don't see any questions as of yet. Please, to the audience, again, as we've mentioned, if you send in your questions, make sure that you are indeed sending the questions to all panelists so that we can receive those. Okay, it looks like people are sending me a couple of private questions here. So while we sort through those, I'll go ahead and maybe go in and maybe ask one of the questions that looks like someone sent to me in a private message. Again, I want to remind the audience, please send the question to all panelists, like I mentioned in the beginning here. But here's our first question. It asks, Kathy, if we are a current recipient of this grant, are we able to apply for funding if the project is different than the current program that is funded?
I'll answer that question in two parts. I hope that I'm understanding it correctly. So if the project that you're proposing is different from the funding announcement, then the reviewers will determine whether it should be recommended for funding if it is different from the program announcement. I hope I'm understanding that last part correctly. For the first part, current award recipients can absolutely apply for as many funding opportunities as they would like to. The reviewers probably won't know that you're an existing awardee. They will just review the proposal for its worthiness, its needs assessment, to ensure that you have the capacity to administer federal funding, and they will make that determination on their end. If it is recommended by the peer reviewers, it comes over to us. We absolutely will know that you are a current award recipient, and we always consider applicants from current awardees. I think our review process internally will be just to ensure that you have enough staffing capacity. So I would probably look to see if you are a current grantee, I would probably look to see who the new folks are. I wouldn't expect to see the same folks listed on both proposals, because I would think to myself, are they able to handle both projects? But if you as an organization have a completely new staff, a completely new program design, then you certainly can apply for this project, for this announcement.
All right. Thank you, Cassie. It looks like, so this next question is around eligibility as well, and it looks like it may be a very specific question, but I'll go ahead and ask it just to remind to folks that we do have the contact information for NCJRS up on the screen here if you need to submit your question there as well. So, Kathy, it looks like the question is, if our county partners with a pretrial diversion program, would this be an eligible use of funds? And I'm going to rephrase that a little bit better. So if we have county partners with a pretrial diversion program, would this be an eligible use of funds? And then they just let you know that these are moms with minor children who are in a court-ordered program, to give you their specific example.
So pretrial, I know that many times pretrial could mean that the persons are awaiting adjudication or they're waiting to be seen by a judge and they're in custody, but they have not been sentenced. So I guess it depends on I would just ensure, I guess the easy question is yes. I would obviously ensure that your program is absolutely going to include residents of a detention center, those who are incarcerated, those who are incarcerated, and that may not necessarily be the same thing as someone who's awaiting a trial. So I would make sure that your population, that the program is going to benefit parents and children who are impacted by incarceration. In terms of partnering, a lead applicant of a county or a local government can absolutely apply for funding and then partner with whomever they've chosen in the community that can best respond to the announcement. You might choose to partner with someone who can do parenting classes. You might choose to partner with someone who could partner with the local school for the children who are impacted. So I think partnerships can run the gamut. They can be a variety of different services. We don't specifically stipulate what types of programming you have to be beholden to. We will make that determination during the review process, but the partnerships seem fine to me. You just want to make sure that your population of individuals is in line with the solicitation's requirements.
Okay. Another question here about eligibility. Are state universities eligible as the PI, or do we have to partner with a government entity?
You have to partner with, so whomever the lead applicant is has to be an eligible entity. And so I would read over the guidelines in the solicitation and make sure your lead applicant is an eligible entity. The lead applicant, who would be the face of the project, can certainly partner with a school or university or nonprofit. I've not seen universities get involved in programming for the prison population, but I guess that's possible. So if a lead applicant who's an eligible entity does partner with a school or university, I would just make sure that the program that you are developing is responsive to the application.
Okay, thank you. It looks like multiple people submitted this next question, Kathy. And so this is just the overall summary that they want to know. Are nonprofits able to apply for funding? Several people asked about the eligibility of nonprofits to apply.
Nonprofits are not eligible to apply as the lead applicant. The only eligible entities are states and territories and units of local government. You can find the eligibility listed. I believe this is on page, I'm scrolling down. You can find the eligibility listed on page 2 of the announcement. I think it's probably page 1 or 2. It's always at the very top, and you can follow along from there.
Okay. Let's see. It looks like someone wanted maybe a little clarification around those who were currently funded. They wanted to know, I guess, if they were currently funded, should they not apply to continue a currently funded program, only something new, question mark. So if I need to rephrase that, Kathy, I may do so, but I think they just wanted.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, though. So I would simply say that what's most important to peer reviewers is that you are submitting a proposal that is in the best interest of the prison population and the children of your local area. The best project that is most responsive to that specific demographic. The reviewers will not know, maybe not, because they are a jury of your peers, and so they are people from the field, but they may not readily know that you're an existing grantee and you were funded last year for the exact same thing, for example. That's why I suggest you just write the proposal for the best project design that is most responsive to your demographic and submit it for consideration. So I hope that answers the question.
If there are any other eligibility questions, and if we have time, I'll backtrack to those, Kathy, but I want to move into, it looks like we have at least a couple of questions, or at least one question that came in around MOU. Someone mentioned that they don't see a requirement for it, an MOU, and so will you please confirm that an MOU is not required as part of the application?
That's correct. An MOU is not required as part of the application.
Okay, great. All right. We're going to go into, I guess, these next set of questions. These look like that they're focusing on maybe a little bit of some definitions and clarification around the definitions, if you will. So someone asked if you could please define what constitutes as a local or a county government.
I have never been asked that question before. I think so. I'll answer it in two parts. The first part, in the interest of time, I think that this might really be very nuanced and very technical. So in the interest of time, I encourage you to reach out to the National Criminal Justice Response Center and submit your questions so that that does a couple of things. That gives them an opportunity to provide assistance to you, and they also confer with us. It's a group of us, and we kind of think about the question, and we put together our best response. So certainly reach out to the National Criminal Justice Response Center. The other part of my response to the question is whomever the lead applicant is, they know who they are. So the lead applicant, who will be the face of the application, who will be the one receiving the federal funding, they have a classification with the IRS. So they know whether they are a county government, whether they are a territory. They know what that they have to know because that's their IRS designation. So I think if you have any, you see the eligibility at the very top of the solicitation, you know what those eligible parameters are. I would just ensure that the lead applicant has their IRS designation and that designation is responsive to the solicitation. It's really black and white. It's just black and white. I'm grateful for the question, though, because here's the thing about eligibility. If you are not an eligible applicant, you don't even make it to peer review. It's one of those basic minimum requirements that we have. And so once the applications come in through Just Grants, it goes through this initial process. And a lot of the incomplete applications or applications from ineligible entities kind of get weeded out, and they don't even make it to peer review. And so you definitely want to make sure you at least get to peer review. And so if you look at your IRS designation, if you review the eligibility criteria and you still have questions, I just encourage you to reach out to the response center.
All right. Our next question here, again, around some clarification and definitions of the requirements. May we submit letters of support and or confirmed partnership as attachments to the application?
Yes, I definitely encourage letters of support, and not just, and I don't want to be presumptuous here, but not just textbook letters of support or a form letter of support, but a real letter of support from those partners or even non-partners, people who are just in the community that applaud what you are doing or proposing to do in their own words, right? So the letter of support should be specific. It should be in their own words, not just a template letter that they signed at the bottom. Letters of support are not required, but they're always really good to have. established partnerships, people who have signed on the dotted line, so to speak, and are committed to this project, should it be awarded, are always really, really good to have. So I would definitely say yes to both of those.
Okay. Just a heads up, Kathy, this one is a little bit long, but I think it should be just read as is. So I'm going to read this for you. For evidence-based programs, if we are unable to find the specific program curriculum in the resource guide, should we look for a separate curriculum, or if the curriculum has information applies to a practice area, would that still qualify?
I'm not sure what they mean by resource guide. So we encourage evidence-based practices in all of our programming. You can certainly submit a proposal with programming that is not yet evidence-based. It will still make it to peer review, and the reviewers will then make their determination on whether they recommend it to be funded or not, based on a variety of factors. If you are awarded, there's another review of the program design that we kind of go through. And we have those conversations at that time based upon what you're proposing, the type of programming you're proposing, and the merits of whether or not it's evidence-based. So a lot of the evidence-based conversations happen after the award is made. I do think that to be competitive, because you're competing with other applicants, I think to be as competitive as possible, it would help you to make sure that you're proposing something that is evidence-based. But I don't know what the reference to the resource guide. Do you mean the OJJDP or the Ojp resource guide?
It looks like they gave an example here on the tail end, Kathy. They're using an example of wanting to use the parenting inside out curriculum, which is an evidence-based, not included in the crime solutions database, but is a parenting education program or evidence-based practice. Yeah,
people use that all the time. Parenting inside out is used all the time. So it's, so because the peer reviewers are a jury of your peers, I mean, these are practitioners, they're social workers, they're correctional officers. If you are using an evidence-based program, and it may or may not be listed, I think you referenced the resource guide. If it's not listed in there, the peer reviewers will automatically know what it is, if it's evidence-based and if it's something that's been used in this field before. So I wouldn't worry about that. And they will look it up. So whatever programming you're mentioning in your application, they will look, if they've not heard about it before, they will look it up and find out the merits of it. So I hope that answers that question. If it didn't, then I would follow up with a question to the resource center, the response center, and so we can delve more into it.
And it looks like, Kathy, they said thank you. It looks like you did address their question there. Had actually a couple of people to say thank you for addressing their question. So, okay, great. A person mentioned that their organization sponsors an adult reentry program. Would these funds support the youth and families for that same population? Again, it's for a reentry program.
Yeah, and so I would go back to the tenets of the solicitation and develop your proposal from there. And let the reviewers determine. So if you submit a reentry project, I would certainly just invite the reviewers to weigh in on that. Just remember, you're competing with other applicants who are strictly addressing the guidance in the solicitation. And so I certainly can't speak for the reviewers in terms of will they, how they would interpret a proposal that has some merits in reentry. But just remember, you're competing with other applicants whose programs and services will be specifically geared toward the incarcerated population. And they don't, my experience is that a lot of our grantees are not able to do really specific, really involved tracking of that population upon reentry. They really have a good hold on them in terms of the programming services while they are incarcerated, but not so much when we talk about reentry. So I know that Second Chance Act funding does include a lot of different reentry announcements, funding announcements. That may be something you want to look to. But, you know, you're certainly welcome to apply for this funding if reentry is a part or if that population is a part of your program design. You're certainly welcome to apply, and it will be peer reviewed.
Okay, great. Now, it looks like one of these last questions that we have here, Kathy, they mention or they say, what exactly are the differences between former submissions through grants.gov and the new justice system, and why are you doing this, or what's the reason for the change? I will say this to the audience. Please note my co-host has put in the contact information where I believe you can reach out to Just Grants. This is both a email address and then a telephone number that if you have any questions about Just Grants, they're there. Kathy, I don't know if you want to respond to this, but I do at least want to let the audience know that my co-host has put in the chat here at least a resource that you can reach out with any of your questions that are maybe Just Grants specific that may help assist with that. But Kathy, if you want to comment on it, it's up to you, but I do want to at least let the audience know that this resource is available for them.
Yeah,
there.
I don't know if I can respond. I don't know. So the first thing, I don't know if this is going to answer the question. I don't know if I fully understand the question. Maybe it's too obvious to me, and that's why I'm overlooking it. But change is good, right? Change is good. And we changed to a Just Grant system for our award management. It's a much more robust system, and it's kind of quite comprehensive. And so prior years, you went from grants.gov to GMS, and GMS no longer exists. Not only that, I think you could submit the proposal. I'm not quite sure, but I think you could submit the proposal in grants.gov. And because Just Grants is a much more robust system, you can submit it in Just Grants. I don't know that that's a sufficient answer. I would recommend you go to the Response Center and let the Response Center give you further guidance. But I do know that a lot has changed because we migrated to Just Grants last October, so it's very, very new.
And for the audience, I did put up.
Right, William, is that your under? I know you don't get involved in processing applications, but is that your understanding that they submit to Just Grants? You may not know.
That's a little bit above my pay grade, but I will definitely just re-emphasize what you've mentioned, which is for the individual asking that question, you can submit maybe that specific question to NCJRS, or even note again that my co-host has provided the contact information here where you can maybe call if you want maybe a more robust answer. I think that's the safest way I can maybe say that, Kathy. Apologies. Yeah. But just also for the audience to know, I did put up that file transfer again for folks, that option there. Again, that is the PDF of today's solicitation webinar, and it has those links that you saw in the presentation that you can easily click on there. So I put that back up for folks. Again, if you're having any issues, you can reach out to OJJDP TTA at usdoj.gov if you need access to the document, but I did want to put that back up for folks. All right. All right. It looks like, Kathy, I don't see any additional questions that have come in related to the solicitation. I'm not sure if you have any maybe parting words for our audience. Oh, wait, let me actually wait 1 second. It looks like maybe some more people are submitting just a few more questions. So maybe, Kathy, can we give folks maybe about 2 more minutes? I think I see a couple more coming in, and so I want to make sure we give them some time to answer those questions.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, it looks like we're getting a bit into some more clarification here, Kathy, in regards to the definition and requirements. Will grantees be required to track and measure all of the outcomes in the program performance measures, including those training and technical assistance outcomes that are not mentioned in the solicitation?
I'm sorry, read the question one more time.
Yeah, sure. Will grantees be required to track and measure all of the outcomes in the program performance measures? And they're also saying that that's including maybe those training and technical assistance outcomes that are not mentioned in the solicitation.
No, you should only respond to those measures, and of course this happens after you become an award recipient, so applicants are not responding to any of them at this time. But if you are awarded, you're only required to respond to those that have to do with your specific project. So the performance measures respond to a variety of grant programs. They're just all aggregate, and so some of them will be responsive to your particular project and some of them won't, and so you should just focus on the ones that are.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you, Kathy. It looks like those are all of the questions there that are indeed related to your solicitation here that have come in. I want to, well, I'm sorry, Kathy, if you have any parting words or last words for our audience, please feel free to say them now before we conclude today's webinar.
Well, thank you guys for joining us today. I hope that you found the information useful, and have a good afternoon.
All right. Thank you. And so with that being said, to our audience, just a few last-minute things before we wrap up. Again, and, you know, actually, I'll read this slide out loud from what we have here. Ojp is accepting applications through its new Just Grant system. Find trainings and use support at this website here. Again, these links that are in this presentation are in the document that I've shared that you can download. And so if you want to click on or get access to any of these links, they're in the PDF of what I've just shared for you all. So please take a moment to access that through there. The other thing here I want to mention to everyone is to know that if you'd like to get in contact with Intact or would like any contact information, we have it accessible through the information on this slide, but you can also find us on social media at OJJDP TTA on Facebook, and where you can learn about upcoming trainings or any additional events that we have. For, again, those looking to get in contact with OJJDP or learn about the JuveJust or any upcoming events OJJDP has to offer, please note that we do have the help desk information here on this slide, as well as the website for OJJDP. You can also, again, sign up for the listserv where you can easily go on here and learn more about upcoming webinars and upcoming events that OJJDP has to offer. Do you have a training or technical assistance need? Well, if so, please feel free to submit your request via the TTA 360 platform. You can access the TTA 360 platform here on the information on this slide. Note that we will have past recordings of webinars, including some solicitation webinars or any other juvenile justice and child victimization prevention related webinars on OJJDP's multimedia page. If you'd like to get access to the transcript or any other supporting materials, again, including supporting materials from today's webinar that you may have issues with accessing in the file transfer pod there, you can reach out to OJJDP TTA at usdoj.gov and we can get you access to that as well. And then finally wanted to inform folks of a couple of webinars that we have coming up. We have a webinar coming up this Wednesday with our colleagues at the NDAA, the National District Attorneys Association. And then also we have another solicitation webinar coming up as well this week that is related to reducing risk for girls in the JJ system. And then we have other webinars coming up the first week of February, including a solicitation webinar as well as a another webinar with our colleagues with NDAA. Those webinars will be up for registration where you can register for those webinars today. And then in February, we have a webinar with our colleagues at Street Law coming up on the 10th for folks to attend, legal life skills for juveniles. And then also we have a solicitation webinar related to mentoring for youth affected by the opioid crisis and drug addiction. And let's see. That is all for the announcements there. The final thing that I want to open up for folks is we do have one final poll question as you leave the virtual room here. And basically all we want to know is how do you plan to apply the information for today's webinar? And so I'll put that poll question up. Oh, let me actually reshare that again. It went away on me. Here we go. And so I'm going to open this poll question. If everyone could please take a moment as you file out of the virtual room here and just take a moment to answer this poll question. How do you plan to apply the information that you've learned in today's solicitation? You can go in and you can select multiple options here. So feel free to just select multiple options that you have here for today's solicitation. How do you plan to utilize this information? Again, you can select multiple options here. That being said, everyone take care. Thank you very much and have a wonderful and great afternoon. And thank you for attending today's solicitation webinar.